Here we are with part 2 of our consideration of determinism and perfect information. How would you avoid complete determinism? Well, that's fairly obvious. Insert some chance element or uncertainty, whether it's drawing cards, rolling dice, or something else. Simultaneously adjudicated movement may be deterministic, as in diplomacy, but it still amounts to an element of uncertainty because not all information is available. How to avoid perfect information? Well, you can have more than two players. If a player has only one opponent, then he can enjoy perfect information because he can maximize his minimum gain. But if there's more than one, then an uncertainty about opponent interaction intervenes, though the mechanics themselves may still be of perfect information. Consider that your game that is normally for more than two players is likely to be played by two at times. Does it then become a perfect information game? Sometimes it does, and that can really introduce analysis paralysis, among other things. The obvious way to avoid perfect information is to have hidden information of some kind. Cards, hidden movement, something like that. Now, why would you avoid one or either of these things? Well, perfect information can encourage analysis paralysis, especially if you also have determinism in the resolution of what other things that occurs. Deterministic resolution on its own can be dry as dust. You don't see people stand up and cheer, generally, because some deterministic resolution has resulted in their success. It's more often when they've rolled dice and got lucky. So what's appropriate to your game is something you have to think about. For example, I have a Rise and Fall of Empires prototype that used deterministic resolution of conflict for years, but now I use stochastic, that is to say dice resolution. Why did I change? The stochastic method feels more appropriate and interesting than the deterministic method. The deterministic method felt sterile. Determinism did not allow a player to have the choice to be bold, to take a chance. It was cut and dried like any determinism is. This is the way it is. The stochastic resolution has a quite small standard deviation, so it's fairly controllable for the attacking player. For example, you almost never lose a 3-1. You might conceivably lose a 2-1. Now I have a Space Empires prototype, and I use the same deterministic method, and I find it entirely appropriate. That's partly because the game uses event cards, which provide an additional chance element. It is a game for more than two players. Both these games are. Also, somehow to me, determinism fits with technological stuff, especially at a very large scale. The larger the scale, the less chance is involved in combat, and this game is very large scale. Fleets fighting fleets. How about abstract games versus games that try to model something? Completely abstract games are often perfect information and deterministic, although not necessarily. Tabletop Euros have an attached atmosphere that often has nothing to do with the actual gameplay, so frequently they are perfect information and deterministic. Models, such as war games, usually include uncertainty because the real world is a very uncertain place. And that's true not only in warfighting. Abstract games can ignore realism. Models cannot. Most single-player video games are deterministic, but they're very far from perfect information by the nature of the computer. The computer doesn't show you anything unless the programmers decide to show it to you. So, by nature, a computer hides everything. Many hardcore video gamers don't like non-deterministic resolution. They don't want to think that they've aimed correctly, and then because of the vagaries of dice rolling, which are realistic, somehow they miss. But they're very much accustomed to less than perfect information. Examples from some games: chess, perfect information and completely deterministic. Diplomacy, you have the uncertainty from more than two players, the uncertainty from simultaneous adjudication, which amounts to hidden movement, Otherwise, you have perfect information. Carcassonne, you have uncertainty in the draw of the tiles. Otherwise, it is perfect information and deterministic, except that it's usually for more than 2 players. Catan, you have uncertainty from the dice rolls and from the cards. It's far from deterministic and far from perfect information. Many first-person shooters actually involve no chance in the conflict resolution. They may not have any other non-deterministic element, but there's lots of hidden information. Monopoly is not even close to either, of course. Consider that without uncertainty of some kind, other than the second player's intentions, you have a puzzle, not a game, very likely. Thanks for listening.